big deal.
Mark asked me to give a program up here, and what do you want me to talk about? He said, anything you want to. So I said, I've never done a program on flint, so I might do that. So we went on about, and later I thought, flint, that's stone, that's not very interesting, boring, and besides that's geology, we want to talk about archaeology. But anyhow, I got a bulletin or a thing that says Jim Bickel will talk about flint. So I guess I'm going to have to talk about flint. So, and it probably wouldn't hurt because most people here think flint is just a rock. Well, it's not. I'm going to tell you how flint was, where it comes from. Well, about 50 million years ago, Jurassic time, 100 million years ago, this Earth had a lot of water on it. It wasn't even developed yet. And this water, when something would flip around, it would sink down into that ocean and become sediment. And what it actually done, it formed limestone, which we know today. 50 million years later, it's the limestone with all that junk settled down into it. Well, this limestone had fissures and cracks and crevices in it, and other materials and minerals and a little bit of everything seeped into those cracks, and they, over 50 million years or 100, they hardened out. Well, today, the oceans, or the earth, with all this water on it, they kind of broke the continents apart and they moved and they left land, but still, under that land is the sediment from all that water. And that's where flint comes from, the sediment that was here 50 million years, 100 million years ago. And the flint that we see up here was formed then by the minerals and materials that seeped into those cracks. So these are, I brought with me a lot of the flint materials. I'm not going to get into all of it because there's every country and every part of our continent has different types of flint because different minerals and materials seeped into them cracks, and they all harden and form flint. So I'm going to show you, I got about 10 pieces of flint up here. You can look at it if you want afterwards, but that's the flint that's indigenous to our area here. That's the flint that when the people came to this continent, that's the flint that they looked for in God. So I've got it named in there, but I'm not going to get into all of it. They found when man come along after this, we just told you how the flint was formed and where it comes from. But when man come along this continent, they were having to eat, so they needed to kill animals and that. And they found out that when they would go after a mastodon or a large animal with just a stick, they'd get up under it and whack it one time, and the stick would break because the height on these 14-foot animals, I've even heard they were up to an inch thick. So if you stuck them with a piece of wood, that wood would splinter. So somebody came up with the idea to they found out there was a stone that could sharpen down. Matter of fact, flint, and you can read this in Reader's Digest, or not Reader's Digest, what's that other fancy magazine? Anyhow, it's pretty well documented that flint, the molecules in flint, go down smaller than steel. So that flint blade can sharpen more than a razor blade. This is said that I don't know if you want to believe it or not. But anyhow, so they needed something to penetrate that skin and let the wood shaft go on in there, and that would kill their animal. And so that was their first use of this sharp flint that they had ever found, that they found when they. The second thing they used flint for when they killed these big animals, they ate them, and they had to, you know, they found out that that meat tasted better if it was cooked, or, you know, so they had to wait for lightning or a thunderstorm for it to catch a log on fire or something, then they could have fire there. And so they could cook that meat, you know. One day, one of these ancient people was coming out of his rock shelter and saw his neighbor over there and said, "Hey, Boris, I throwed a couple of these rocks down, and when they hit into each other, light flew away from them." And they thought, well, that's the same thing that does when we have them storms and it gets fire. So they started playing around, throwing them rocks at each other, and the lights were sparkling, and a little bit of it got hold of some moss, dry moss and leaves, and started a fire. So flint also was important to those people because they needed it for fire. They also they found out later on that if they did friction like that, they could also get fire, but they felt, you know, the fire is hot, and then when they did things like that, they felt the warmth going off, and eventually they found out that they could start a fire with wood. So if they didn't have this flint, they wouldn't live. They used that mastodon, or whatever bigger animal they used. They used it for clothing, food, dwellings, and about everything. So if they didn't have flint, they didn't live. So I guess we brought a bunch of flint here, and Michelle's gonna, I just told you where the flint comes from. She's gonna tell you how Native Americans made a use out of this flint some 20,000 years ago.
All right. Well, I think I can say that our favorite kind of flint tends to be the Indiana Hornstone, which has another name, Harrison County flint, and Wyandotte chert. So chert's another name for flint. So we found that it starts off in these nodules, we call them nodules, and the outside tends to have a little bit of limestone on it. You break it in half, and you can see this beautiful blue-gray flint. And even the crystalline impurities inside kind of make some of the artifacts special. So, you know, they didn't have television a long time ago, obviously, so they needed something to occupy their time. And napping artifacts, napping knives, tools that would help feed them later, you know, use them to catch their food would be something they would do at night. And so, like I said, starting off with the nodule, they break it down, and then actually even maybe take it off into more chunks, and then come up to having a preform. And then this would have been a very large piece, but eventually, as they nap this, they end up with a product such as the cache that we have. So you can see there are different pieces of Indiana Hornstone here, and I love the ribbing that you see inside. I'm looking for any bullseyes, but I'm not quite sure if we have any right here. But you can see when you look at some crystalline impurities as well, and in the pieces. And so a Native American would be napping something, and he would, you know, maybe make it extra special by trying to include or incorporate the impurities, because it would be pretty. So you can see different pieces of hornstone here, but our favorite would be the cache blades. And so there are 70 willow leaf cache blades that we found. They were found on March 1st of 1985 along the Wabash River, about 100 yards from the Wabash River up on the sandy ridge. We decided to go hunting, and it was really cold. And I remember looking at the bank sign that said 34 degrees, and I believed it. So it was kind of a chilly day, and we were hunting about a couple hours and found about 5 points. And then Dad said, okay, let's just go up along that ridge one more time, and then we're out of here. Usually it was, we'll go up around there, around the ridge, and then head out. So that was the plan. And so as we were walking, Dad was up on it, and I was below. And he said, he went and picked up something. He says, Michelle, I think we found and then cache. You know, as soon as he said cache, it's like, oh my gosh. What had happened is this area had been trees, the wooded area the year before, actually for years before, and they cleared it, and so that's why we wanted to try and hunt there. And we asked the farmer's permission. He said, sure, go ahead. And we did. And we think what happened is this plow pulled off the top of where this cache had been buried. And they call it a line cache. These pieces were put together. They were kind of stuck together, laying horizontally. And we think the plow took off the top layer and then took them down. So as I was coming towards Dad, I could pick them up on the way. And so eventually we found this area about 14 inches, the thing that would look like this, just beneath the surface beneath the surface, and that's where they were all put together. And we think maybe that a Native American had them. Maybe a couple of guys went down to southern Indiana, napped them, because this kind of flint is found, like I said, in Harrison County in southern Indiana along the Ohio River. And the lithic debris, or the debris left behind by napping these, and all of the pieces left behind were not here where we found this. So we think that he and a couple of friends went down along the Ohio River, napped them, brought them back up, because who would want to carry 30 or 40 of these? So brought them back. This person had them in his dwelling, and a cache is actually a collection of light things that somebody used. They store them. They store them for future use. Maybe he was using this as a bartering tool, like for money, or maybe he had them set up so he could make knives or some blades for later. We don't know, because we think he probably passed away before anybody else knew about them, because that's why we found them. A year later, I bet the plow would have come along and crushed all of them. We think we were there at the right time, and it's been great, because for over 35 years we've been able to display them. But you can see within the cache some of the, you can see that they used as much of the nodule as they could, even getting some of this limestone incorporated. So they weren't very wasteful at all. And there are 70 altogether, and I've had kids come up and count. But I only count 69. And that's because one is at our house. So right now there are 70 cache blades in Kosciuszko County. So they're kind of together right now. But 7 of them were broken, but nice. It was nice that they were able to be put back together, so they weren't damaged too badly. So, but yes, out of the 70, only 7 were broken. We found. Are you going to? Oh, I thought you were.
No, I'm talking to my wife.
Okay, but 69 were found on that day. But my sister and Dad went back a week later and found the 70th one. So we just think it's a gift that we were able to find them and be able to share them with others.
Cheryl,
Yes.
might that be like money under the mattress?
Yes.
Was it used as currency or trading value?
Right, for bartering, yes, it could be. Maybe somebody would have needed something, he could have passed them on to them and used them in trade, or maybe, we don't know if he was like the banker. He could have been in charge of them. But the thing about it is it was the only, besides the 5 points, it's the only thing that we really found in that area. So we kind of think he was a loner. So, but, did you have anything to add to that?
No.
Okay, well, I think it's your turn then.
Oh, my God.
So, but this was, it's a once in a lifetime find. What time period? Oh, this is Edina, yeah.
Yeah, it's the Edina culture in the wooden time period, 3,000 years ago. Well, someone asked about if that's like the bank. Yes, that very much was their bank. And she said there was nothing else around there because there was a nice big hill over there. We never found any. The reason for that was, I think, because that was the head chief. He didn't want any lesser people living and walking around him, so he was always out there by himself. But that's just conjecture.
Because there was just nothing, no signs of.
He might have took on it by himself so that other people, he wouldn't know where that stuff was. Okay, the second part, we pretty well covered the flint and why they needed it and how they, if they didn't have flint, they wouldn't be here today, because that was everything to them. That was their money, their value, everything. I'm going to further this program by talking about the weapons And I'll talk about the weapons first, and then what was the other things we were talking about? Weapons and tools and ornaments. So we'll just kind of move along. So on their weapons, when they come across that Virgin land bridge, all they had for a weapon is a stick about like this. And I told you how they put the big hunk of flint on it, and that really helped them. And so this went on for 12,000 years. They just used this as a weapon. The first weapon was just a stick, and then they found out if they put a stick like this on it, they could, and this thing's called an adornment, which in the Indian language means spear thrower. But they found out that now, instead of running up under that 15-foot mastodon, they could stand back and flip the spear at them. This was a big invention to the people back then. So they could stand back and throw it and not get up under and get squashed to death or get hurt by that big animal. So this is one of the first inventions, and it must have worked so well because it lasted for 12,000 years. And so 12,000 years later, some guy come along and said, hey, if we take a stick and put a string on it like that and shoot our arrow, and it'll shoot it 3-4 times further than what that system works. So this happened, and they say that in our area here that they weren't introduced to the bow only 800 years ago. But we're talking 12,000 years went before the bow was invented to them. And so bows are just not a stick, a wooden stick with a string on it. I have 83 different bows at home. Each culture one thing I want to say now, we're starting to get into the historic time when white men were around here. A lot of this stuff is influenced by white men. A lot of this stuff we first talked about, and I'm still not done talking about it, is prehistoric times, when they had all the 3,000 years ago. There wasn't no tribes then at all. They didn't tribe up yet. So I don't know if we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves talking about these weapons, because we're not done with the historic Stone Age time. I'll show you some of the stuff here. Here's some of the finest stone artifacts. Everyone in here was found in Huntington County, Indiana, and they're the nicest pieces. I've been collecting for 60 years, and this is the nicest pieces I've got, and I kept them, the nicest pieces. So there's a lot of nice flint there, and it's prehistoric knife blades. I'll show you them. I think I got knife blades here. You look at these pieces right here, and you say, well, them don't look like knives to me. They look like, well, I brought a couple samples of knives to show you. Here's what they did with their knife. They put it on a handle like this. Now it looks more like a knife. And so these things here are knife blades across there. And you don't find them very much because the plows break them in half and break them up. But now that looks more like a knife. And then when the white men come around, they hammered out blades, and this is an Indian knife, and they decorated a little bit. And so this is what it went from. Stone knives up to this type of knife. They went from the weapon part, they went from the adornment system to the bow, and then into the gun that the white man introduced to them. So that's the weapons, basically what they did many years ago. They and are you talking about the tools? No, I know. Anyhow, that was basically the weapon part of it. And here's another. I told you there was a lot of different types of bows, even though normal people think, not normal people, we're all normal people. People that doesn't study it as much as I do. This thing is just a bent stick, but there's a lot of different. Everyone in even today's cultures, we want to do something a little different than the other cultures done, and they did it back then 2, 3, 4, 800 years ago. So there is a lot of different ones. I have probably 40 or 50 different types of arrows at home, and I could do a program on arrows, but I just can't. Here, I'll just tell you about what's different. I'll talk a little bit about arrows. This here's a prayer arrow, very much similar to a religious, how they start the bead and say another prayer and the bead and another, the prayer arrow. So that's different. Here's an arrow here. This one has a steel point. It was made by the white man. Here's a arrow that is a little older. It has flint on the end. They probably napped it out of a hunk of flint. So there's 3 different arrowheads, and I don't know what this one is. And this looks like another with a piece of metal with the white man. They took can lids, hinges off of doors, anything to make them arrowheads right at this time. And this particular one here, since we're talking about arrows, is a little different. The reason it's a little different, it doesn't have any feathers on the end. That's called the fletching. And if you see an airplane go by and he was missing his tail, he'd be going like that, So that's why they put the fletching, the arrows on the back of it. That guided the arrow, just like the tail of an airplane will guide the airplane. Well, you say, that doesn't have any on it. Well, this one is one that they used in the swamps. When you get in the swamp to hunt something, alligators, garfish, or whatever, you're only going down from here to here. You don't need that tail, so that's why that doesn't have this fletching on it, because it doesn't go very far. So. Okay, I think, Michelle, you're going to talk about tools, and there's the tool sitting there.
All right, so this is a buffalo scapular or shoulder bone, and so it would definitely be used to hoe, especially when they were getting ready to plant. And this one is pretty shiny. You can tell that somebody's been handling it a lot because of the oils in their hand. And so that's what this is, the buffalo shoulder. And this guy here, this is a hafted axe. It would be used for chopping trees. So he, many hours went into pecking this down so that they could get the shape they wanted, and it's indented on the inside so that the handle would be, would be able to fit it on there. So this is for chopping up trees. And then this other one's metal. Well, the pioneers brought the metal, introduced it to the Native Americans, and so this would be more of a trade axe. But yeah, pioneers showed them metal, gave them metal, and then of course the handle is attached. So this would be definitely used for chopping something smaller. So not a big tree, but maybe working with some brush. This is elkhorn scraper. This is the horn of an elk, and attached is a hafted scraper, and so they would use that to scrape hides. And then to be able to finish the cleaning, this is a rib bone that has a scraper attached to it, so not as bulky as the horn. And then some odd jobs. We have hammers at home that we need to pound nails in, but this is also one do some light work around the house. But they use everything in nature to survive, so they never wasted anything. So that's the one thing we noticed. They, if there was some, they used the stone, they used the wood in the forest, and use part of the animal, whether it's the sinew, to help tie on their tools to the sticks. So they never wasted anything, any part of the animal, just like your hoe. So,
she talked about the tools now. I want to add one more little thing on this. Is a neat piece of neat artifact. And what's so different about this piece, if we loan our tools out or you left them laid somewhere, you put your name on it, or you get one of them scribers, you put your name on it. Well, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of years ago. They didn't have a language there. They didn't write their names. But on this particular piece, they took it and took probably a sharp object, a nail maybe, since they were historic Indians, and made 3 dots this way, 3 dots that way, and 2 came down that way. That guy signed his name to that, so if there were about 6 or 8 or 10 of them there scraping hides from buffaloes, they would know which one belonged to each other. But this is the only one, or one of the few, that I've ever seen that was marked with a person's name, and that makes it very unusual. And I was going to talk about ornaments. Well, back when they started, everybody had to just dress up, even back in prehistoric times. And they had to wear certain things to make them look pretty. You know, they had their own ceremonies, religious and feasts and marriages or whatever this is back we're talking about. They did that too. Well, they didn't have metal back then. Metal wasn't, they just didn't know of metal. So they had to make most of their ornaments out of banded slate. Now, banded slate is not really indigenous to this area, but there's a lot of it up in Canada. We had that big glacier here 14,000 years ago, 2 miles thick. It picked up a lot of that glacial till and wrung it and deposited it down here in Indiana and formed your lake over here. But when that melted, it wasn't going to pick up that stone and take it back to Canada. You see that big boulders around? They came here 14,000 years ago, and they also brought big hunks of slate. Now, the reason they picked on slate to do their ornamental pieces is because it's pretty, it's got bands in it, it does have different colors, although it's still basic color is gray. So they used that as their ornamental material at that time. And here's the banded slate that we brought with us today. Now these are all from Huntington County. These are some of the nicest pieces found in Huntington County. That other case right there on the end has another bunch of them. There are primary pieces that we talk about, you know, this like, so they had banner stones, gorgets, pendants, birch stones, and atlatl-weights. Now, them are the main things they made out of this banded slate, and a lot of it is ornamental. Now, the banner stone is not really ornamental. They made that, I'll show you what a banner, I don't know if you can see, we're not in that big of a crowd, but this right up below my finger are banner stones. They look like butterflies. They look like, every one of them are different. I think they say there's about 30 or 40 different types of banner stones. Now that banner stone is exactly what it says, banner. It's a banner. You raise the banner for identification. So they took that banded slate banner stone, and we're talking thousands of years ago. They put it right here. Each one of them has a hole. And if I take this thing, this dart off the end of this metal shaft, they will fit. They will fit right on here. So then they'd have a banner to walk around with. And this is the banner to walk around with it. And then that was their. Maybe it was represented their society. It may have represented their clan or we don't know because prehistoric man did not write. The only thing we get out of prehistory is what people like shall I interpret it. So I'm interpreted, they stuck that thing on there, and when they come home from a hunt, that meant something. It might have meant the clan they were in, or it might have been a religious symbol, nobody knows. So out of this ornamental material, banded slate, I imagine they used feathers. Now there's birds around, why wouldn't they make a nice feathered thing on them for there's wood around. Why wouldn't they make a good wood mask? You know, they did that too, but that stuff didn't last. Wood only lasts about, if I put this laying out in your yard right there, in 100 years I'd come back and you'd say, where is it? Well, it's went back to the ashes. Everything's went back to the earth again. So, but stone won't do it. So that's why we can try to look at that stone and read what it was used for 3,000 years ago. The second thing is a bird stone. I said something to Missy here. I said something, I'd like to have a bird stone. She said, I don't have any. Well, no, because they're the rarest of artifacts. I don't, and it's hard to see, and I know it is. You can come up later and look. There's a bird stone there, and there. I had at one time a lot of them, but the bird stone belonged to the shaman of the group, and he would put that this bird stone, and you can see him. You probably can't see him back there, and almost made a PowerPoint program for us. See that up there? Well, we didn't do that, so we're gonna have to if you're that interested in what a bird stone looks like, come up afterwards and we'll show you what they are. But they say, I don't look like a bird stone, looks more like a doll to me, but who says they didn't put feathers on that back 1,000 years ago, and it looked like a bird to them, but no one was there to videotape it. So, we'll just have to go, and I think they put that, tied that on their head with a piece of a string they made out of grasses or something, and they tied it around. That's the shaman. So when he walked around, just like the Pope or a bishop, he has a certain signet up there that says, I'm the bishop, or I'm the whoever. I think that was to tell you who the shaman was, and they used to pass that down. They didn't, and nobody else wore them. That's why they're so rare. That's the what do you call it? If you collect artifacts, that's on your bucket list, and most people don't get to finish their bucket list because they're so rare. The other thing is pendants. Everybody knows what pendants are. There's most women in here have got a pendant on. Here's a couple up here, and like I said, I don't know if you can see them now. They're just a nice piece of banded slate that's shine down, and they'll even engrave them. So they'll wear them around, and that's their dress up. Just like, why is a woman wearing a pendant today? Well, she did it. She's dressed up a little bit. Now, there's the gorget. Gorgets, the word gorget, a lot of these words the Indians didn't have, and they were made up by us. I often talk about a donut stone, people. What Indians made donuts? Well, they look like a donut. We call them donut stones. But anyhow, a gorget, it comes from the French word gorger, that thing right there. And they actually put these pieces around their neck. Now, at first they put them up there for protection because this is an honorable spot. And then later they started, well, if we're going to wear that thing, we're going to shine it up a bit and make nice ones. Well, that's what do I have any in here? I don't even know what I brought today. Oh yeah, there's a two holders in there. That's the two holes where they stuck the string around, tied it around the neck. And mainly not for protection, but later on it was to dress up. So them are ornamental pieces. I think we're about really done with talking about the prehistoric things that we brought here, even though our bow is historic. But we'll go over there and talk about prehistoric things. And there's a lot of ornamental pieces over there, and I'll go over there. And Michelle, it's your turn to talk. I don't know what we wrote this down. She lives here and I live there. We just didn't get together and say, hey, let's practice this. We didn't do it.
So we're looking at the piece bowl.
The piece bowl, okay, go with that. Huh?
Okay. So this is made of poplar wood, and it was used at most gatherings. And so came from northern Michigan, from the Ojibwa tribe. So they've been putting in there to be able to feed people. We also have baskets, and the baskets can be made of dry out over time. So I have some at home that are kind of drying out, and others that are in good shape, but yeah, it's pretty neat to think that, okay, they had the forethought to make something out of just form, And this one has some decoration on it, and the decoration comes from dyeing the grasses. And so that stuff around walnuts, that comes around and it's green, and then when it gets, when you get it on your clothes or on your hands, makes it really dark. Still there. Oh my goodness, good example. He's a basket maker, all right. But that's what color it would become hard. This one is white and black. The black's from charcoal, and the white's from crushed limestone that's been whitewashed. Just like artifacts come from different time periods or different cultures. Pottery is the same way. You can get red colored clay from certain parts of the United States. I know we found a bowl that I really liked, and it was from Arkansas, which has one of the largest clay deposits. And where we used to live in Huntington County, we were working in our yard and we had to do some digging, and that clay, it smelled bad, but it was a bluish black in our yard. And I thought that'd be kind of neat to, to have made some kind of pottery from that. But it's definitely come in all shapes and sizes. I've seen bowls and vessels as big, this big around before. And so, again, you see them from all over the United States, and the design will indicate maybe the time period or the region. Okay.
Yeah, there's one little thing in this, and she probably, I'll just talk about this little basket here.
Oh, I didn't know if you were going to talk about this.
Well, do you want to talk about this?
Yes.
Okay, with this here, we're talking historic Indians. This here is a wooden basket, and there's some prairie grass to hold it together. They made baskets and boxes and whatever for their own use. But this particular one is from the Ojibwa tribe up there in Wisconsin, northern Wisconsin, northern Michigan. And those white, those are porcupine quills. There's a lot of porcupines up there. They're quills. We hunt mushrooms up there. We find porcupines, and you don't dare get one near them. But anyhow, them quills are about that long. Where the Indians, or Native Americans, would take those quills, and it was about like that. I don't know what you describe it, but they would take them and boil them until they got softer. Then they took something and split them and hammered them out until they were flat, and then they could use them for decoration. So this is a wooden basket and decorated with porcupine quills. And you say, well, I never seen any red porcupines or yellow ones. No, they had different. They used different dyes. They had red ochre, and they were red from the berries and yellow from, they just had different colors from nature that they used, and they had about all the colors that we got. And that's what this particular thing is. It's a basket covered with porcupine quills, and they like to dress up. This all the way back to prehistoric times, I mentioned. They like to dress up just like we do yet today. So this is just a nice basket from up in northern Michigan. I took part of Michelle's conversation way there. Well, the next thing we'll talk about is we'll go to historic ornamental pieces. Well, this is 1971, I think, and I have a bunch of friends, and we have meetings and such, and I took this trigger guard to one of my meetings that I found out at the Syracuse-Wawasee in Huntington County. And these guys, they thought that was the neatest thing there ever. Where'd you get it? And I don't know. Just hung around and asked me all kinds of questions, and I told them I found it near my house. And so they said, well, could we come down and metal detector on their lot? And here it was 1971. I didn't know nothing about metal detecting. I was an arrowhead hunter. So I said, well, I don't own the land. They said, could you ask that guy? I asked the man. He said, yeah, you go ahead. And I want to know what's out there anyhow. So they went out with their metal detector and found a bunch of artifacts with their metal detector. For the fact that they found that trigger guard. And the Native Americans did have guns, especially the upper crust. I'm thinking I ought to think of something else here. I don't even know if I want to. I brought one of the nicest pieces I own that's in that box there, and I don't think I was going to show it. But it might be a good time to show it. I've never shown it before, that's the truth. It comes from it. And I was going to study up on it, and I forgot to study up on it, or tell you so I could talk about it. And I forgot to look it up, so wasn't going to show it. But this here is a peace tomahawk, and this piece here, only the chief would have got this. Only the big, if they wanted anything, they wanted land, if they wanted the best of anything, the white man would make this and present it to the chief. Now this thing here, you can put tobacco in there and smoke it, or it's more symbolic. Yes, it could be a weapon, but too late in history for someone using this. This here is just a nice peace pipe. We call them peace pipes because they they hoped to make peace with presenting the Indian with this tide. And then the Indians, then they tacked it, put horse tack in there, so they could get off the pioneers and that. So that. Okay, but we are talking about historic times and when the white men talked to the Native Americans, which had tribes up at that time. And here in Huntington, I know we're about 60 miles away. You guys got your own Indian settlements around here. I know, who's that guy, they named the lake after him? Cheer or somebody like that. You know, you have your own history, but this is our history from Huntington County. And most of this stuff came off of their campsite there in Huntington County that you know, back in the 60s and 70s, you could go on people's land and shoot rabbits and they didn't give a darn. And then you could go there and arrowhead hunt. Like today, it's a different world. There's lawsuits and all that stuff, so they don't want you on your property. But anyhow, if without permission. But anyhow, back in the old days, I used to go hunting for arrowheads, and I found a lot of this way back when. And this is my whole lifetime of collection. Now, some of that I didn't find. Some of it is good Miami material. That you know, if I see of any, I have to have it, and I get it. Even though we don't eat for a while after I buy it. But I do have stuff. So some of this stuff, I found this rifle thing out on the porch. I found a lot. But anyhow, you want to come out and look at that. There's 3 pieces in there I'll talk about, or maybe 4. Coins, I found coins with a hole punched in it. Well, they didn't know metal. Anything was neat to them because they were actually coming out of the Stone Age. So anything that had color to it, they liked. And anything silver, they never knew silver until the white men come and bring it around. So the white man would bring a silver dollar around. Somehow they'd get it. They'd hammer that thing out till it's about this big around, or until it was about this big around. Because that is a silver dollar hammered out. And they hammered it flat, and then they took a nail and they made it concave, convex. They were making a badge or a ornament to put on their clothing to dress them up a little. So if you look at this one here, it's one of my favorite artifacts. They took a nail and got in behind it and tapped, and then made a little tip come out the other side. Now it looks like a real neat piece of ornament there. So that comes from out of porch. There's gun flints and we've only got about 10 minutes, so I can't talk about that all the time. But anyhow, I'm going to tell you about this thimble there. I found that at the Forks of the Wabash, and I looked at it, and it's got a hole in the end of it. I thought, how can they use that? If you stuck a needle with that, it'd go right in your finger. But then I went to the Potawatomi, I don't know where the powwow up here in Columbia City, and I saw the dancers, and they had thimbles all around their leg, and they had a hole in it, and they put a little tinkle in there, and then when they danced, and boy, that made the biggest ying, 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 ying noise. So that there was what the Miami used maybe 200 years ago. That thimble come off the canal boat, which goes right through Huntington. You could get thimbles back in that day. So that's what that is. That's one of the neat pieces. Another neat piece is, they're all neat to me. But beads, I find beads out there. The Indians didn't have glass beads. They didn't have color. When the white men come in with yellow, pink, blue, green, colored beads, they'd trade about anything for a string of beads. So, yes, they did have them, and then they would lose them out on the campsites, and I'd go out 200 years later to pick them up. So here's a bunch of beads right there, and you just can't talk about ornaments until you talk about beads. Now, we have several beaded pieces at home, but my wife had to have a vest, beaded vest, and so you know, we've had that for many years, and it's about as pretty as you can get. It's made of buffalo hide, and then they beaded it, and it had to belong to one of the chiefs. And you don't, they were poor. The Native Americans, they're poor today. We walk to the pueblos and reservations today, and they are dirt poor out there. So you got the haves and the have-nots. Well, if you got something as pretty as this belonged to one of the haves. That meant the chief or a higher upper in that society, in that tribe. So his son probably wore that. And we have beaded saddles at home, and you can't bring everything, but beadwork was really neat among the historic Indians, and they loved them. When the white man came, they tried to convert. Well, they didn't try. They did convert a lot of the Indians to a religion, you know. And so you see a cross here, and there's several crosses in there. The Indians, they were being converted to Christianity, so that was a popular trade item. You see this right here, it's probably a rosary off of a black robe or a priest or something. That thing has really got wear on it because they probably treasured it and wore that, you know, took it everywhere with them. So that's a neat piece. There's a fish hook in there made out of copper. There's even a piece of glass in there. Now, you say, what did the Indians do? They never do glass. That piece of glass right at the top, I found that right on a Miami camp. And it was a wine bottle. The French came here in 1700s, and they had a wine bottle, and they put labels on their wine bottle, just like we put Budweiser labels on ours. So that there, I had it, it's in French, and I had somebody interpret it for me. They said that so-and-so vineyards in so-and-so France. And it's pressed glass, and they pressed that right against their bottle. Well, the Indians found the broken bottle after the Frenchman drank the wine. He just took that and knocked off all that glass and took it over to some sand, and so he could carry it around and say, what would you want to carry? Hey, they didn't have nothing. That was neat to them. So that's really an Indian artifact. And like I said, I got a coin. One of them took a coin and made it into a cross because they were being converted into Christianity. Another one here, this one right here was a cross. The guy took a musket ball, went over to a piece of wood or log, and he made a cross in there, and he took that musket ball in, started hammering and formed that cross, and he had, what I thought was neat about it, they did not trim it out yet with a piece of flint or a piece of metal or anything. So, and here, hey, oh, there it is. I was going to talk about these little girls might want to look at that afterwards. They made little dolls for their children and beaded them. If you look down in here, you'll see little kids with beads made out of beads. So, and here's little kids' moccasins. Now, mind you, these were the chief's relatives because the poor people did not have dolls made for them. And so, Michelle, who's up next? I'm done talking about ornaments.
I think that was it.
No, we got a saddle.
A saddle.
We got about 5 minutes. I can talk for 5 minutes. You say Indians didn't have saddles. They had blankets. We seen them on TV. Well, when the Indians were put on reservations, that took their ability to go out and hunt deer away from them. And we did it, so the white man had to furnish food for them on this reservation. So the white man, or I call it the white man, I mean, whoever was there at the time and taking care of this, they brought them maybe 10, 12, 15 head of cattle and put them in there. For the white men, the cowboys, they had a nice big old saddle, and they could lasso their cows and brand them and do what they want. But when they took those to the Indians, they would get on and lasso one of them cows or cattle and pull him right off the horse. And so he looked one time, he was out in the desert and saw this, that the white man's saddle had a form. But I don't know if there's anybody riding horses around here. You do? But do you have a saddle? Well, inside it's leather, isn't it? Okay, but inside that saddle is a form. It's about like that. Then they work the leather around that. Well, here we'll go back to where them Indians were getting pulled off their horses because they couldn't hold on to their cattle. So they said, well, they saw this. And this probably was from some cowboy coming through the desert, you know, and his horse kicked the stone and went lame, and they went along, and he let the horse go, and he carried his most valuable possession, that the saddle. He carried that for another 10 miles, and after he carried that long, he thought, boy, this is too much, so he threw the saddle down. Well, that night, voles, mice, crickets, everything ate all the good stuff, all the leather off of that saddle. And it looked like that 10 years later when the Indians found it. So he thought that's what they looked like. So he made those just like this. And this is willow tree. You can bend a willow tree with heat and water and form it the way you want. So he made himself the saddle. And the important part of it, you can see the wear of it, he made a horn. That's where he could tie that rope to. And so when he pulls on that, he had a hold of the cow or whatever he was pulling in instead of him being pulled off. And then he had maybe leather or fur or anything else, so you know, maybe a little softer. And so that's the story of my saddle there. Well, I think we have an hour. We only got about 5 minutes. I don't know if we're going to quit now or can we answer questions if somebody wants to. Look, she's doing this for Skype or Snap or Zoom or something. And she might have to quit, but we don't have to go because afterwards, right now, we will answer any questions they might have. And then after this, if you want to come up, we'll stand back here. You can ask a question, say, what is that? And I'll be able to maybe tell you. So with questions, give me with the anchor. With the anchor.
When you said you found, are you out just looking, digging, because obviously you know what the desert center and the metal detector and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, when you're finding, my dad used to walk through the fields back up in the tower and found arrowheads and stuff like that. But I mean, I can't imagine bending over, picking out a piece of glass and knowing that that was important. So like when you're seeing things, are they in the banks of the rivers? Are they in the, I mean, where are they?
It's like anything. If you got to study on it, you're a lot better if you know what you're doing. I went and read a lot of books to find out where the Native Americans lived. Easy ways to find out where they were buried. Well, you don't take somebody in the 1800s and go down to the Wabash and bury them. You bury them right there. That's how you can find a camp. Also, you go to that area, and if you find what's called lithic debris, fire-cracked rock, you know you're on a campsite. There's another thing. If you find over 2 arrowheads or 3 arrowheads in an area like this, you're on a campsite because there's a lot of footprints between here and Huntington. But you've got to go where they're at. And we study this, and we talk. I hear farmers, hey, Bickel, I got a whole box of those. Well, hey, guess what I found? A campsite. So you ask him, then you buy his box full of arrows for $100, and you look on his land. So then you end up with a whole bunch. But that's how we do it. It's just a hobby. We never dig, you know, we don't want to get into that, but there was a law written in 1989 that limited a lot of what you can do and what you can't. Back in the old days, and you may not believe this, but I know that there was a bounty on Indians. They didn't like them. They wanted them out of here. We don't want to go back that far and tell you what's good and bad about it. But what I'm trying to get at, they changed. Everything's changed. You know, what happened then all the way up to 1950 when you were allowed to have a human skull in on your desk at your library and you were the professor at the college. All that's changed. He can't have that. We can't dig today.
Well, and the you know, they would obviously want the highland, so it would be drier, sandy soil was good. Does it drain? So just things like that.
Kind of aware, yeah.
They didn't have, they had bad. Guess what? Arrow River was either at the rest. So you look around rivers, because that was their interstate